Lucia Roncalli is a doctor, and she received her MD at the American University of the Caribbean. She grew up in Marin County, and when we first met a couple of years ago, she said she was thrilled to be back home, but it had changed quite a bit. She spent her time before returning to Marin in lots of interesting places: Central America, the Netherlands Antilles, South Africa, and Ireland. She's currently a physician at Vista Family Health Centers in Ukiah and serves as a hospitalist, that's a new term, and physician at the Ukiah Valley Medical Group, or Center. Dr. Roncalli does group work with survivors of the Pol Pot genocide. She has resident training in doing evaluations of survivors of genocides who apply for asylum in the United States. And she is an affiliate health provider with Survivors International, which is a nonprofit organization that seeks to treat the wounds of torture for those who have survived persecution and have fled to the United States seeking safety and freedom. Please help me in welcoming Lucia Roncalli.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your patience. It's really, really nice to be here. I want you to know that my style is one of dialogue, so don't hesitate to raise your hand and interrupt me. I'd much rather have you do that than wait till the end. And I guess we might as well just start. You'll have to put up with my challenges with clickers and so forth. I also very much will accept your redirection, if you will. I tried to listen. I've actually been interested in this lecture series for a number of years. I think we're amazingly fortunate to have this center here. And I tried to listen to some of the lectures on YouTube, because I'm always working when it's lecture time. But if you realize that there are actually things that you're more interested in, again, don't hesitate to raise your hand, because this is your learning, and we'll collaborate. Okay. All right. Thanks. Bring down the house light. Or do you not do that?
We can't.
Oh, okay then. So if you have to squint at things, then just tell me. So I have to confess that I had to look at what the title was of the talk that I was supposed to give. And I organized this assuming, I saw that there aren't any lectures on the Cambodian genocide. So I'm going to give you just a very quick bird's eye view of what that involved, a little tiny bit. And then we'll move from there into talking about the work that I've done with survivors who actually are our neighbors right here. So here we are. Here's Cambodia. It's very important that you notice that it sits right there between Vietnam on the one hand and Thailand on the other. And of course, Laos is important as well, but for what we're going to be talking about, Cambodia for a long time has been sort of like Belgium in Europe. It's been this crossroads for warring factions. And if you back it up even a little bit more, you can see the proximity of this cluster of Southeast Asian countries to the People's Republic of China. And I want to remind you that in the decades that we're talking about, the US and the French were very involved in Vietnam, of course. 1972, Nixon went to China and opened up China. And this was a huge event. I actually was in college and I was studying Chinese at that time. And I was the only non-business person in my classes. The idea that a billion-person market could open up was huge. And it also, this was the end of the Cold War. It triangulated the Cold War relationship between the United States and the Soviet Union. So it's just important to have a sense of the historical context as well as the geography of Southeast Asia. This is a picture of a huge, huge temple complex called Angkor Wat that is kind of emblematic of the historical achievements of Cambodian culture. This is it from the air. And those of you who've been to India will recognize the similarity of design. Actually, a lot of the culture and language of early Cambodia came over from southern India, came over from Tamil Nadu. But boy, we could have 2 lectures on Angkor Wat itself. But for now, just to understand the pride and beauty and significance of this as a historical landmark is important, and you'll see why later. Okay, the other thing I have to tell you is that I put together slides from another doctor who worked with me in my clinic, and so the green ones are hers, and I want to acknowledge Anna Lowe. And I tried to get the same wallpaper on all the slides, and I couldn't, so there you go. But quick timeline, you can see that Cambodia, it goes, of course, way back into prehistory, but Khmer is a word that you will hear in and out when we talk about Cambodia, and it means Cambodian. It's again, a sort of iconic word denoting who we are as Cambodians. And that culture that was so formative or foundational had its start in the 7th century. Then skip ahead many, many centuries, and we have the French coming in. This, of course, 19th century is when the great powers of Europe were carving up Asia and Africa into colonial protectorates. So many, many Cambodians who were educated for a long time spoke French. This is why, just as Vietnamese spoke French. During World War II, Japan came in and occupied. After the war, France came in. Is that all right? No, I keep losing my voice. 1953, Cambodia declared independence. Again, this is part of what was happening in the colonial world all over in Asia and Africa, and became independent. You probably have heard of Prince Sihanouk, and he became the head of state actually earlier than the 60s, but in 65 he broke off relations with the U.S. Again, prelude to the Vietnam War, right? Kennedy had advisors going in before he was assassinated, so the early 60s, we were already involved there. And so by 65, the North Vietnamese had, maybe some of you have heard of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It was a trail that extended from farthest North Vietnam through the jungles and the mountains, all the way south, all the way south. The North was communist, the South was not, and the war was about keeping the whole country from becoming communist. And there was a theory that if Vietnam fell, then it would be like dominoes, and it was called the domino theory, that these, one after another would become communist. So, of course, everybody was interested in Vietnam for varying reasons. And the supply trail was a thread of a trail. It was almost imperceptible through the jungles, and people hauled supplies on their backs, often barefoot or in sandals made of rubber tires. And part of the Ho Chi Minh Trail circled through Cambodia. You saw how close Vietnam is to Cambodia. And I guess I'll just say now, because I don't know that I'll circle back to this, the U.S. bombed Cambodia because of this, trying to knock out the part of the Ho Chi Minh Trail that went through Cambodia. We dropped 40,000 bombs, and many people not only were killed, but were maimed. And landmines were set up by all these warring parties, and landmines actually are still a public health issue in Cambodia, dating back to that time. Many amputees, lots of people who have lost arms and legs because they're walking, doing their business, and they trip a mine. Okay, so 1970, the U.S. Did quite a bit to get Prince Sihanouk out. Remember, he had broken with the U.S., and we put in a puppet regime led by a man named Lon, L-O-N, Nol, N-O-L. A pretty ineffective government, and during those years that Lon Nol was kind of being propped up by the U.S., the Khmer Rouge, which was the Cambodian indigenous communist movement, was consolidating itself in the countryside. And then by 1975, they were strong enough to come into the capital city, Phnom Penh, and occupy it. So actually, it's right around now. I think it was April 14th, 1975. They marched in. And I should tell you, tomorrow is Cambodian New Year. You should also know that. So it's very significant that this lecture got set for this, and I think for them to conquer the capital city around New Year's would have been very auspicious and also very frightening for people who do not want to be governed by the Khmer Rouge. So Rouge, right, red. So the red, the communist Cambodians. This was the Communist Party of Cambodia. Renamed the country Kampuchea, and then again renamed it. Another cue that happens is changes inside your body. So if you get gas pains, or you know how you stand up fast and you get the head rush, that can be a panic trigger for survivors of this genocide because of the pains of hunger and because of, when you're so dehydrated and working in the tropical climate and underfed, the fluid balance in your body is going to be pretty poor. And the odds are too, they're bending over, planting rice seedlings. Standing up is often going to be to witness something that you really wish you hadn't seen. So a head rush is going to be a panic button. And in our clinic, it's something that we're working both to educate the providers and also to talk to Cambodians about this and see if we can bring a little bit of ease to those things. Also, very, very different constructions about qi. You know about acupuncture and the idea that there's this circulation of energy in your body. In Cambodian, it's called wind. And there's a whole belief system around qi and how it's related to the head rush, and how when you stand up, it's because the qi got disturbed and you get your head rush, and it's because your neck vessels are going to blow apart, and it's going to be just like as if you got hit in the head or whatever. It's the body is not a sense, not a place of security and joy. It's more a place to stay away from. Okay, so Cambodia was a Buddhist country, 95%. There were minorities, there were Muslims, there are Cham Cambodians who are Muslim Cambodians, and there is a small minority of Christian Cambodians that most of their families date back to the colonialization from the French. So there are many Catholic Cambodians and a few Protestants. So I mentioned taking over Buddhist terminology. In Buddhism, when you set out to learn to meditate, one of the terms in Cambodian is you're going to reconstruct the person right? Good meditation is going to make you question the way that you always thought about yourself. That's part of what you're aiming to do. Well, that's perfect if you're running a re-education camp. You use that terminology, you talk about reconstructing the person. Only it's about destroying their family and creating somebody who's going to work for the glory of the Ankar around the clock. Thinking too much. When you set out to meditate, you want to tame the monkey mind that thinks too much and makes all these disturbing thoughts. Well, that got reappropriated to be, oh, you know, you're missing your mother, you're thinking too much. So there was this great, really destruction of a meaningful, a framework for existential meaning that extended into the culture. It wasn't just in the monasteries, and kind of polluted it. There were 50,000 monks and nuns who were massacred. Almost all the temples, again, this is reminiscent of the Tibetan situation under the Chinese, and actually it was during some of the same years. So it took out the teaching hierarchy of Buddhism in Cambodia, and subsequently there's a lot of distrust of current clergy because some of those clergy are in the government or have come from the government, and their roles are a little bit fuzzy. It's hard to know exactly who these, if you're somebody who grew up with the old notion of you lived in a village, the village had a temple, the temple had a monk or maybe had a small monastic community. You came, they did rites for you if you needed some help to conceive, or you were sick, or you were building a house and you wanted to make sure that the spirits of the land were happy. This is a whole different thing because the people who knew how to do all of that are gone. They're dead. We have in Santa Rosa a Cambodian temple, and there is a monk. They actually asked me to sponsor a second monk, and I was thrilled to do so because both of them have lots of training in mindfulness meditation, which is very, very useful for people who have come through trauma. And so I wrote the sponsorship letter and I went to bat with the State Department, and the guy ended up being sent to Fresno because during his interview with immigration, he answered one question wrong. He didn't quite understand the English and he was very flustered. So our second monk in Santa Rosa now lives in Fresno. And Unchim, the monk who is with us, I have invited to teach mindfulness meditation in the clinic. And that was a very, very interesting experience, just to get people on board with it. Oh, we already go to temple. We're just going to chant again. We don't want that. And I said, no. This is like learning how to ride a bicycle. This is a skill, and it has to do with your mind. This is not about incense and chanting. Oh, but we're women. You mustn't ask him to come and sit with us who are women. I said, well, I've already done it, so sorry. And he wants to come. And so forth down the line, including from Ching, the nurse that I work with, who's extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary woman. I told you her story. And she has been involved in this journey of discovery after saying all these same arguments. And it's been very, very interesting to watch her relax into accepting that this amazing monk is willing to come and to teach her too. So there's a lot of renegotiating of a heritage that used to be seamlessly integrated into the culture. Now, having said that, Buddhism came into Cambodian society as it came into Asia with these societies already really shamanic and up and going. So Cambodian Buddhism at the level of villagers and illiterate folks has ghosts, dragons, ancestors, these winds, these channels, energetic channels in the body. Shamans, you go to shamans for help with you've got a ghost in your house and you got to get the guy who knows the right thing to do, or you think the winds in your body are out of whack, so you go to another person. And you go to the monk also, because the monk knows how to work with all of this. I'm going to give you an example that came out of one of our group discussions. In November in Phnom Penh, there was a water festival. A new bridge was being inaugurated, and there was a failure of the electricity on the bridge, and there was a stampede and a panic, and it was a suspension bridge, like the Golden Gate Bridge. And you know, some of the big demonstrations on the bridge, the thing starts to sway, and that's how it's strong. Same thing happened. But people panicked, and then the lights went out, and there was a stampede, and 360 people died. So that's the Western version. I just gave you the Western version. What I got from my friends here is that this is the year, not only of the tiger, but of the blind tiger. This is a really rare year. A time for great caution. The blind tiger is opposed by a dragon, who's a very hungry, greedy dragon, and if that dragon isn't properly propitiated, that dragon's going to be out for human blood. So the dragon encircled that bridge, and people who were on the bridge felt a force field, and they couldn't let go of each other, and their bodies were locked into contortions because of the force field of the dragon. Well, we would say it was humid, bodies were packed together, water is an excellent conductor, there was a mass electrocution. But this story has such great force that in Cambodia the price of bananas went from 50 cents to 10 bucks a pound because bananas would propitiate the dragon. And 2 of my patients had their houses stacked with bananas the day that we met, because they were going to offer bananas to the dragon over and over again in hopes that this would not repeat. So we're living in a very, 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 very different world, and it is not a useful thing to come in and say, listen, you know, dragon, tiger, dragon, schmeiger, nah, it's electric. This is not helpful. I think what is helpful is to recognize that this was a functional culture that's lasted for thousands of years, and it's coming into, first off, people have been disrupted in the most violent way possible, and now are coming in to encounter with us. And we have very different stories about how the world works, and we better start listening to each other's stories or we're really going to be in trouble. All right. Temple is on 4 acres of land. The New Year celebration starts tomorrow at 6 o'clock at night. It goes through Sunday night. You are all welcome. You would be greatly welcome. And there will be feasting and all the rest of it. I have pictures. I'm sorry I can't show you. Okay, so here I am. I come back to California, right? I love Asian culture, love California. I'm plunked down into this clinic, and I have one question. You know, I'm a kid, I'm a child of the Vietnam years, and I'm a Navy brat. So the Vietnam War was a big thing in my life, and I was horrified by what we did in Asia. So Cambodian, Thai, Laotian, anybody comes into my office, I have one question, which is, so how are your dreams? Well, everybody's having nightmares 5 nights a week, and I would say the men are the worst, Cambodian men and the Thai and the Laotian men. So I go to Ching, my nurse, and I say, Ching, this is really, there's a lot of suffering. What are we going to do? I want to start, you know, how can I reach out to these men? And she said, oh, no. You got to normalize it through reaching to the women. You have to start a women's group, and then the men will see the women coming, and then it'll be okay. I said, okay. So she picked out nearly 30 people, women who were genocide survivors, who had PTSD diagnoses, were still suffering. Our county mental health funding ran out years and years and years ago, like 15 years ago. So there's been no mental health services. And that's who I started to meet with. And I knew at the beginning I was going to have absolutely no control because I speak not a word of Cambodian. Actually, I speak about 4 words now. And that most of the conversation, I wasn't going to make them stop to tell me what was being said, but I have training about the body and trauma, and I sure can read trauma signals that are in fact cross-cultural because they're based in evolutionary biology. And we all share the same nervous system and the same set of chemicals in our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system because it's what successfully kept species alive, and so it kept getting handed down. So I knew I had that going for me. And I knew that if you bring isolated survivors of horror together in a neutral place where they can speak their own language, you've already created a healing environment and a healing event. So that was what we went in with. That's what I was gonna do. And again, I really learned. I thought, okay, so I'm not gonna ask everybody their horror story. This is not what we're doing. So I'll just start with, so what's your name? Who named you? And I thought that would be, that'd be fun. We'd hear stories of grandmothers and stuff. Well, so-and-so used to be named such and such, but because Dad worked for the Lon Nol government, her name got changed when the Khmer Rouge came in, and that's how come she's still alive. So-and-so used to be named such and such, but then her mother decided that she must be unlucky because her mother was holding her when one of the US bombs fell and her 6 siblings were destroyed with that bomb blast, so therefore she was named differently so that she would bring better luck. And it just went on. It wasn't all like that, but I would say probably 30% of the name stories were like that. So I appreciated the graciousness that we could begin here and we could share our names. And when they found out that my name means light, then they named me Luebe, which is light in Cambodian, so I have a Cambodian name. The goal of this group is to uncover resilience. One of my core beliefs is that no matter how bad it is, the odds are really good that given the right environment and given enough time, there's still a capacity for joy. And that's what I was looking for. And we've been meeting for a year, and one of the feedback things that I got from my colleagues was, oh my gosh, you're working with survivors of genocide, that sounds dreadful, how can you do it? And I'm like, no, it's not like that. And they would pass by our room where everybody's like in stitches, giggling so hard they're like peeing in their pants, and say, well, that's the goal. We don't have to go back there and tell those stories. The stories are there and they're going to arise. I don't have to go looking for them. But what I do have to go looking for is safety and something in that narrow filter where we can't look at nature, we can't go into the body. I just got to find where the joy is. And the group was going to teach me. And so the group has taught me. And in a year, half the group started out silent. I have nobody silent anymore. And in fact, they tease each other. Oh, you used to never speak up, and now we can't shut you up. Well, yeah, I know. I got a lot to say, so you have to put up with it. That is very slow, and it's huge achievement. So healing from these kinds of situations is something that happens collectively. Most cultures of the world, the idea of going in one-on-one to see a therapist is just bizarre, and you wouldn't do it, and it's scary, and it has a stigma to it too. We're a wellness group, and we're a class. We're learning how to eat. We're learning about how we can regulate our minds. We're not a mental health group, even though when I write notes, my diagnosis is PTSD, and that's how we're billing. But for the purposes of this, I don't want that stigma. And Ching is absolutely crucial to it, and I wish I could show you her picture. I also have found that movement is very important. We do Tai Chi, and that's a way you aren't dealing directly with body sensations, but people can begin to feel some sensation of energy moving around them. And that's a beginning. of being able to come back into the body. I figure we're probably 2 years out from being able to identify actual body sensations. And think about it. If you have nearly starved, or you have been beaten, or you have been raped, your body holds all those memories. Your mind may be able to wipe it out, except at night. But your body holds those memories. And if you start to check in, you're going to find them. So there has to be a whole container built and little tiny doses of that experience explored after this huge container and this sense of social safety is established. Okay, again, I'll spare you. There's a lot of interesting issues here. I've already given you some of the examples of what we did. So I'll just close by, I don't know where my time is, but I think it's getting close. Yeah, so I want to tell you about something that I've come to realize, and then I'll show you a little bit about it. One of the ways that you create torturers, and it's documented, it's CIA pioneered it, there's a lot of literature about it. Very important early step is you dehumanize. You create a group that's other, and by definition they're not human. And you get, in some of the readings you've had, you read filth, vermin, you talk about ethnic cleansing. There's this idea that if you can get rid of this other, things will be better. And then there's a whole progression. It's actually, torturers are normal people. Psychopaths are rejected. They don't make good torturers. That's a whole other talk unto itself. What I have come to realize by working in the war zone in Nicaragua, working in the townships in South Africa, now with my experiences actually in the Caribbean too, and with these women, is that there is an internalized dehumanization. And I mean that at the most literal level. People really believe that they are not human. And my first tip-off was in the war zone in Nicaragua almost 30 years ago. I was teaching midwifery workshops with country women way back in the war zone. We were teaching underarm guard because the US-funded Contras were picking off the midwives that we trained because they were, aligned with the wrong party. And we had little graduation ceremonies at the end of our 5 days together. And over and over and over again, a woman would stand up and tears would be running down her face, and she would say, before this workshop, I didn't know I was human. I didn't know I could think. I didn't know I could speak. And now I know I can think, I can speak, and I know that I'm human. Thank you very, very much. And when I was reading, before I went down there, the writings of the dictator, the Somoza dictatorship, 3 generations of that family said one way or another, my people shall be as animals. They shall know themselves as beasts of burdens only. And from another perspective, Che Guevara, who was coming totally from the other end of the spectrum, said, the silence of the people is the silence of the stones. And this is not just a figure of speech. So if you don't survive genocide, right? We don't know what's happened to you, but you're not a normal human. You're doing something else. Maybe you're extinguished. Maybe you're doing something else. If you have survived genocide, the odds are very good that in some deep way, your sense of yourself as a human being has been utterly, utterly destroyed. Okay, so this was kind of brewing in me, but in the things that I introduced in my group, I only chose stuff that had been successful either with Cambodians or with women who had survived torture in other settings. So there's a project in South Africa that Doctors Without Borders had pioneered called body mapping. And people pair up, they lie down. Doctors Without Borders have more money than I did. They lie down on big firm cardboard and they pick a position, a body position, and then their partner outlines them. And then there's sort of a structured thing. You pick the color that most represents your soul. You outline yourself in the color. You have in back of you someone, a kind of indistinct figure of a spirit or a real person that's been helpful to you. You go inside, you feel the place in your body that's got the most peace, the most safety. You think of what would be the emblem, you make a symbol of that. Many of the women, I showed So these body maps turn out to be amazing maps. They're personal journeys that are mapped out. And in South Africa, again, you have an oppressed, illiterate group of people who were denied medication. So the Doctors Without Borders did this for women who were dying with AIDS in order to create something lasting that they could know that they were leaving for their kids and their families. So I introduced, I showed slides, I used the names, and I said, well, so here's so-and-so in Gondro, and her story is she, right there, she drew a little thing on her knee because her dad threw acid at her because she wouldn't marry the person that he wanted, and then he ended up forcing her anyway, and he sold her for a cow to this guy. So lots and lots of conversation amongst the Cambodians. Oh yeah, I know, that does happen. Partly I wanted to create a sense of solidarity, and I wanted them to understand that horrible things happen to people around the world, in this case to women around the world, and that people manage somehow not to shut it away, but somehow to have a language about it that includes what is essential and indestructible in their souls. So that's what we started with. And I showed them that, and I said, okay, so now we're going to do this. Oh, no, we don't do that. We don't draw. We can't do that. I said, no. You're not going to draw. All you're going to do is lie down on the floor, and then you're going to trace around. Oh, okay, maybe. Well, what came out, these are illiterate people. They had never been given paper. They had never been given art supplies. This was absolutely new. And then we walked through this, and then the process began to morph a little bit. Instead of a kind of spirit human person, helpful person, we had the crew. In Cambodia, there's a crew who's kind of like a combination of a bouncer and a wise elder that's with you when you're born, and if you do it right, you stay in touch with your crew. So it kind of comes out of your head, or it might come out of your mouth, or you might have it buried in your chest. So they started drawing themselves with the crew in some cases. And then some of them decided this looked really too crazy. And it started to drift in the direction of sort of Cambodian Barbie doll pictures. And I thought, oh gosh, I like the real ones better. But I thought, shut up. This is not my project. And people started to help each other. They started bringing in children. They would show up with their kids, and they would draw together. And at first there were kids, in the doorways and kind of peeking in. And first couple of times I thought, I'm just going to let the moms have some free time. But I realized that several of them have the second generation violence between themselves and the children, and that it would be worth it to bring them in. So the kids came in, and there became collaboration, and the kids started producing their own images. And it just went on and on and on, and this thing continued to unfold and continued to unfold. So at the end of it, we had an art show. And I said, you're artists, and I think you should show your work, and I think we should share it. Now, what am I doing? What I'm doing is, we started out with I'm Not Human, but somehow we ended up with this representation. And we've kind of labored to give symbolic expression to our humanity. And we've showed it to each other, but we're living in a foreign culture. We need to show it to the broader community. We need to show it to our relatives. So I got the same thing that I got with the drawing. Oh, no, art show, we aren't going to do that. Art show? Art show? I said, yeah, we're going to do an art show. As soon as I started seeing that kind of giggly stuff, I thought, yeah, we're going to do that. So we hung these things in a clinic hallway, and you'll see they're huge. And I had a maintenance person who took great loving care with it. He was very touched by the story. And to see this group of women come through and see their own representations in this gigantic form. Oh, and the other thing is, I said, so, when you have an art opening, a lot of times there's refreshments. Do you want to bring some Cambodian food? Oh, no. People think Cambodia food dirty. No, I'm not going to do it. And I said, I don't think so. People pay lots of money for Thai food, so you can one-up that. No. And then I thought, you know, with my luck, the clinic would come down with something about how patients can't do food, so I better shut up about it. So I didn't say anything more. And they showed up, and they created a banquet. And we had like 75 people. The MAs came, the doctors came, the secretaries came. It was an extraordinary event. And one of the doctors burst into tears. And her patient was like, why did I make Dr. Lin cry? And so I brought them over to each other, and we had a translation. And her doctor said, all these years I've taken care of you, I never knew what you had lived through. I never knew. Thank you so much for drawing this picture so that with the tears coming. So it was a huge thing. And now we're going to have an art show. One of the artists who did some art for the clinic happened to come through that night. And he said, oh, I think you better show in our thing, in my studio. So potluck. First one here is done by a woman who actually did not survive the genocide, but her mother was a survivor, and her mother was extraordinarily abusive. And she is psychotic. She's full-on psychotic. We started to do the work, and she's a very gifted artist, as you can see. And all the goofy, crazy person talk stopped. Her kids came in. She's one who's had trouble with anger, and her children, they came in, they helped her. You see the black hair and the black overlay on the pants. She came in and did this about 3 sessions after she had created the original picture. And I thought, oh my gosh, she's going to black paint the whole thing. But she didn't. And her mother was abusive, but she wanted a heart for her father with a picture of a shrine. So that's what you've got over here on the side. And the words, my father helped me. And I said, so Paul, do you want to say anything about your mother? No. And I said, okay, your mother doesn't have to be here. And she was like, right. This is just my dad and me. My dad helped me. And her place of safety is the lollipop over her heart, and it says, candy gives me energy. And these flowers are for my father, the flowers underneath the shrine. If you're getting tired, you can get down. So, and she actually, I would like to get her to the JC, because when she works on art, she can talk normally, and she stays focused, and she has reaped a tremendous, tremendous yield from being able to do this. Okay, so next here is a woman who was the sole survivor of 7 kids. This is not the bomb. This is they came in and they shot everybody, and she pretended to be dead, and she lay under the bodies. And so I had metallic gold paint that an artist friend of mine had given, and she worked. This is an example of getting more towards the Barbie doll type thing. Her original drawing had been much less stylized. But she finished, and she stood back and she said, good job, art. Like creative art. I love my lips. I love my hair. I love my life. So that was her culmination. Over here, the woman there also, boy, her story is incredible. 11 years old. They would come in and they'd dive for the art materials. And at one point I said, no. I'm going to make you talk. I want you to go around the circle and tell me something you appreciate about yourself. All right, so first we got, I give to the temple, and everybody was going to be appreciating that they gave to the temple. I said, no, it's got to be something from your own life. What we finally got from this woman was when she was 11, she was in charge of her 6-year-old sister, because that was all who was left. They had to escape. The Khmer Rouge were starting to cull people in the work camp. Other people told her to escape by walking on the dikes at night, between the rice paddies. She said no, and her sister held her around her neck, and she walked through the rice paddies all night, this deep in water. Everybody else got killed because the silhouettes were visible on the dikes, and those 2 survived. And she said, I respect that I was intelligent and that I could have that idea when I was 11 years old. And she was very frustrated with her hair, because, you know, she was lying on the floor and her hair went out like that. And we finally came to that she was hiding her crew, that clearly her crew was with her. And so that kind of made it okay to have hair like that. Let me see what we're doing. Oh yeah, because this is come off. Yeah, let me. Okay, sorry. All right, I'm gonna shout.
I'll fix it. I'll fix it.
Okay, so I offered to them that either in Cambodian or in English, we could write some of these stories, most inclined, as you can see. However, one woman said, I respect that I am still alive. And her story is, this is Sai Kim. My name is Sai Kim, and I have 4 daughters and 1 boy. I have 17 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. I worry about my daughter and about my son. I worry about my health too because I am sick. I wish my grandkids all have a good future. I appreciate myself for all the courage I have, for the strength with which I am making a good life, even though I am still sad. And she does struggle with depression when she's on vacation. So, okay, thank you for that. I mean, I could show you many, many of these, but thanks. Okay, so just to say thank you. Whoops, it's gone.
I turned it on.
Okay,
There are
All right.
people coming in.
all right.
There we go.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. Just to say thanks. Thanks for sitting through all of it. Thanks to the art holders. And I guess we're making room for another group. So if you have questions, you can come up and ask me one-on-one.